cosmic consciousness, extraterrestrials and UFOs, sacred geometry, ancient civilizations, spiritual connection, the quantum universe. All of these topics and so much more with your host, Sev Tuck, on Alien Spirit with Sev.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alien Spirit. I'm Sev. I am with a gentleman that undeniably has a very strong conscious connection to owls. Some of us believe that we have spirit animals as guides that help us through life, and one could assume that Mike Clelland's spirit animal guide is an owl, but I wonder if he would say that, because maybe he also talks to wolves, because he is a professional wilderness guide, and he has authored and illustrated books about the techniques of advanced backpacking. And he's had remarkable owl experiences of his own in the wilderness. Mike's hit book, The Messengers, is one of my favorite books. I have recommended it to countless people. I consider it a reference book, and I keep it very close to me at all times. And this book explores the connection between UFO abductions, owls, synchronicities. It's also a personal memoir, but it's more than just owls and UFO abductions, because in this phenomena, there's a connection with dreams and shamanic experiences and even death. Mike hosts 2 podcasts. One of them I was lucky enough to be a guest on recently. It's called Hidden Experience, and he hosts The Unseen, which is on Whitley Strieber's network. Mike is the author of many books. He speaks at conferences. He gives interviews around the world. You've seen him on TVs and documentaries. Welcome, Mike Clelland.
Welcome. I have not been on documentaries.
Oh.
Or on TV. I bet, yeah. So
you haven't been on TV or documentaries?
I don't know. I'm waiting for George Norrie to call me.
Funny that I assume that.
I know. I know a lot of people who are on like ancient aliens and things like that, and I'm like
me,
like you, exactly. Like what's?
Yeah, I think most of your friends have been on ancient aliens.
Yeah,
haven't you been on? I cannot believe that you have not been on any TV show or documentary. This blows my mind. If anyone's watching who's a documentary person or a TV show person, you need Mike on.
I think my stuff is too weird, honestly.
Weirder than having 2 red X's on your tush, talking to aliens.
I think the world wants to. I think the world is so preoccupied with. Here, let me see if I can let myself up a little better. Tell me if I'm coming into. Am I too bright?
No.
Okay. I'm as far as but I think the world wants those Tic Tacs and Navy pilots talking about nuts and bolts stuff. They don't want us weirdos talking about synchronicities and spirit animals and stuff like that. So I think the general public is lagging behind your podcast. I agree with you. Yeah.
What do you think these drones are all about?
I think they're man-made drones.
Yeah, I think so too. But what do you think's going on?
I can't waste any energy on it, because it's like if I've seen some footage and it looks just like a drone. Like it looks like it doesn't, like when you see even the footage of like something truly anomalous, like it's unsettling. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And these don't look unsettling at all. They look like someone's got the joystick and is like controlling it, from, a quarter mile away or something.
Yeah. What really gets to me is that they want us to believe that they really don't know what it is. Like we have all this stuff in our airspace and our military does not know what that is. I cannot believe that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we've got. Oh, I don't want to waste my time with it.
Okay.
I feel it because like what happens is I get an email from someone who has like a really powerful mystical experience with an owl, and that's what I want to explore. I want to explore that. I want to talk to those people.
Yes. And I do have some questions. I have 4 or 5 questions from your listeners on Hidden Experience. And they're good questions. We'll get to them in a few minutes. First, I'd like to start off with where you were born, where
Detroit,
you were
Michigan.
raised, and Detroit, Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
where you were raised.
Southfield, Michigan, right next to Detroit.
And what were you interested in as a kid or a young adult?
Cartoons, drawing. I wanted to be an illustrator. I turned into an illustrator. I wanted to work for Disney and do animation as a little kid. So, and I did end up working in New York City, and I did a fair amount of animation for mostly TV commercials, Deadly Dull stuff, the Honey Nut Cheerio Bee.
You drew the bee?
It's so funny. People say that you drew the bee, and no, it was like a staff of like 40, and they've had dozens of commercials. I did one of them. So I didn't draw. You worked with a team. One person draws it. One person does it. I draw it with a pencil. I drew it with pencil, and then someone else scanned it, and then what's called inked it, or at the time it was done with a Xerox machine.
My God.
It's so tedious, but so I did not. I certainly drew the Honey Nut Cheerio Bee and some M&M stuff, but I was part of a team. It would be on the TV commercial for 2 seconds, just and it was like a team of 8 working for a month. So it's not that exciting.
Do you miss drawing or illustrating?
You know what? I started. I did it professionally in New York City, and then did book illustrations and magazine illustrations forever. And I found that I got really burned out. I don't miss it at all. I've been working doing book stuff. It's funny, if I need an illustration for a book, I just draw it. I don't have to ask anyone. That's really nice.
Yeah.
So I don't have to ask in it, because when I work as an illustrator, and also, this is going to sound really, when I worked for advertising, doing advertising stuff, doing illustrations for advertisements, people would say, I need one illustration. It needs to be 4 inches by 6 inches. Here's reference for something that you did before. This is what we want it to look like. Here's the product we want you to draw. Here's a pencil sketch our art director did, so you know what to do. And we need it by Thursday at 4:00. And I would go, great, awesome. And now people call up and say, hey, I got a book and I want some drawings, but I don't know how many, and I don't know when the book is going to be due, and I don't know, So with the advent of desktop publishing and things like that, it became almost impossible to do illustrations because I don't know, it just was a different relationship between me and the client. So and then what would happen, this is going to sound totally snotty on my part. People would do it. I would do a drawing, and the client would look at it and go, oh, that your drawing is so good. I know exactly how I want to change it. And then I would have to start over and draw it again. So anyway, I'm happy not to draw anymore. I sometimes do a little sketch on my own, but I haven't worked for hire in 15 years.
Do you play a musical instrument?
No, but I dress like I do right now, don't I? So
yeah, I was telling Mike he looks like a beatnik.
I could be in a jazz band in the 1950s.
Yes.
Yeah. So
do you have a black beret? All right.
I do not have a black beret, but yeah.
Let's get to what everybody wants to know about, which is, what is the connection between the owls and the metaphysical, specifically UFO abductions? When
I did the first book, the book you held up, Richard Dolan was the editor of that book. It is since I now have the rights to it, so it's now there you go, there it is. Yeah, so
that's a great book.
And when I was working on that book, Richard Dolan was kind of reading it and editing it, because I had given him some chapter samples and stuff like that, and he said, I'm going to publish this book. And he's a funny guy. He's very, very intense and serious at times. And he called me up and he's like, hey, Mike, I'm halfway through this book and I really like this book and I'm really looking forward. Like, when do you get to the point in the book where you say, like, what it all means, like what the owls mean? And I was kind of like, you're going to be disappointed, because my honest answer would be, it's a genuine mystery. then I don't have a good answer. Well, I have some good answers, but I don't know if they're true or not. How's that? So I think I should do this off the top of my head. I have 4 answers for what what owls might be.
Okay.
In their connection to the mystical, because I don't think it's so much that they're connected to UFOs. I think it's more that they're connected to like a highly charged human experience. I can talk about that too. But number 1, that owls are an alarm clock. So they're just simply here to wake us up. So they're playing that alarm clock role. People see an owl in conjunction with a UFO. It's a wake up call for some. So it's to wake you up. And then number 2 is that owls are the totem of the transformational process. Like when people are transformed, I think that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm finding in my research. Like why is the owl in some reports and not in other reports? And I find that the people go through a transformation. Oftentimes it's like a spiritual transformation. They'll have it's very common for people to say, "Oh, I saw this UFO and saw this owl, and then I had a spiritual awakening." It's not 100%, but there's definitely a pattern. So that kind of transformation takes place, and that the owl would be an archetype. So we are not, like an archetype in like ancient mythology, or let's say, you watch Star Wars, and on the surface, it's Luke Skywalker having an adventure. He's flying around in his starfighter and having lightsaber fights and stuff like that. But what you're truly seeing is a hero story, the story of the hero. He is the archetype of the hero. So owls would be an archetype, and by that, this is what I mean, where I'm saying, like, I truly don't know, but we are confronted with something that doesn't have a good answer, although internally, in our subconscious mind, we would understand the meaning of the owl in a way that our conscious mind can't truly understand it, but our subconscious mind can. That would be a loose definition of an archetype. And then, so those are the kind of things I was dancing around with in the book, because I truly don't know what the owl might symbolize and what it means.
So the owl can be a symbolism of some kind of cosmic consciousness experience that you just had. But could an owl also be an ET itself?
It can be, so there's plenty of cases where you have the screen memory aspect. And I'm sure most people who are even slightly interested in the UFO contact lore would have heard these stories where people, here's a very common story. Someone's driving down a road at night. They see a 4-foot tall owl in the road. They stop their car. Sometimes the owl is tall enough that it can look over the hood of the car.
Oh my gosh.
And then they kind of drive home, and then they're 2 hours late. This should have been home at midnight, and it's 2 a.m. I'm kind of generalizing, but this is this type of story that I hear all the time. And then I've talked to hypnotherapists. I've talked to Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb and Leo, and they were all very clear that they would have people under hypnosis, and they would say, "Okay, now describe this owl that you see in the road." And they'd say, "Well, it's bald and it has these big black eyes and it's wearing a tight-fitting spacesuit, and I don't think that's an owl. It's really skinny." And they're describing a prototypical gray alien.
Ah.
And so the implication is that the ETs, most specifically, seemingly the gray aliens, are somehow putting a psychic, they're putting a psychic projection into the mind of the observer, and the observer thinks he's seeing an owl when there's actually a gray alien standing in the road. Here's another thing that I get all the time. People say, "Oh, I saw this huge owl in the road," or "I saw a huge owl in my backyard," or "I saw a huge owl like on a walk on the sidewalk, and it stopped me, and I looked at this owl, and it looked at me, and I got this eerie feeling. And then they go through, like, you can do it online, you can get a bird book. In North America, there's not really that many big owls. There's really only like 3 big owls. Lots of little ones, like teeny ones that are like the size of a robin or something. But there's very few big ones. And then they go through the bird books, and it doesn't make sense. I think, oh, it doesn't look like any of these. That doesn't make sense at all. So I've done this. I've had this conversation with many people where they say, well, what about this one? And I show them a picture of a great gray, which is a kind of an owl, or a great horned owl, or a barred owl, or a snowy owl. And they're like, nope, not those. Doesn't look like that. Doesn't. I'm like, then I don't know what you saw, because there's no other owls in North America. And the ones in Europe and Asia look essentially like the North American owls. They have it's a slightly different species, but so people say that all the time, and then they say, oh, I saw this giant owl, and then they can't ID it. That doesn't match any known owl in the bird books. So we're confronted with a genuine mystery here. But the implication is, if the gray beings are putting a psychic projection into the mind of the observer, so it's not only owls. I've talked to a lot of them. There's the top 2 on the list are deer and owls. And then below that, there's a whole bunch of other things that show up: squirrels, raccoons, dead relatives, Jesus. There's reports of Jesus. Firemen show up in a lesser number. So people say, oh, I was driving down the road, and there was a fireman standing on the side of the road. And then they drive by, and then they realize later that didn't make any sense, and under hypnosis, something else emerges. Now, but here's what's interesting: the owl and the deer are at the top of the list. The majority of the screen memories are either owl or deer. Both of those are like mythic totem animals of the forest, right? So they have a mythic lineage. Athena is associated with the owl, the goddess of wisdom, and Diana, the goddess of the forest, is associated with the deer. So we have this. This is, for me, I may be totally off base, but for me, this is the most interesting part of trying to do this research, is kind of pulling on these threads and seeing what clues might emerge. Now, I might get really good clues. They might lead nowhere, but I've tried to document my searching, the process of my searching in this research. And that a lot of that book, The Messengers, some of the things I talk about, I feel like they come to a dead end, but I have to kind of exhaust the thought process of how I'm digging into this.
Can you tell us a couple of deer stories?
Oh, sure. A woman is at her house. She knew she'd been having contact experiences, and there was a bright flash outside. And she goes out and she stands on her porch, and she's looking into the darkness, like, what made that bright flash? And so she's on the porch in front of the house, and the porch kind of juts out a little bit. And then she looks right toward the side of the house, and there are 4 gray aliens standing there. And she looks at them, and they look at her, and then they go, and they kind of morph into 4 deer. And then the deer walk backwards around the corner. And she said it was really eerie and awkward. They doop, 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 like they kind of walked backwards and then went around the corner of the house.
Okay, I don't hear a lot of deer stories.
I've heard a lot of them, yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe
I'm hearing a lot of owl stories because I'm asking to hear those owl stories.
Right.
But that's very common. Oh, on the side of the road, there'd be a deer, and then they stop, or there's a deer on the road. They stop. The deer is looking at them. The deer doesn't move when the car comes up, and then they get home and they've had 2 hours of missing time. I'm generalizing now, but that's very similar to the owl story.
All right, I've had something similar to that.
Oh, what have you?
Well, I don't know if I had missing time, but there was a deer right there on the side of the road staring right at me, and I'm in the car and I'm looking at it and it's not moving. But I've had owl things too, owl stories. that I always love my owl stories because they really feel like I feel like I'm in a fantasy land when I have my owl experiences. Yeah.
The
Mhm.
owl is a much more mystical animal than the deer. The deer is a very grounded animal. It's a very, I don't want to say normal, but we have a totally different relationship with like a archetypal relationship with the deer. Yeah. Deer represents fear, the deer represents the forest, while the owl represents wisdom and almost it represents other dimensions because the owl can fly into the night. So ancient man would have seen the owl as something magical, right? Like nowadays, we could say that the owls have highly evolved eyesight through the evolutionary process. But ancient man would just simply think the owl was magic because it could fly in what we would call complete darkness. And so all throughout the world, if there's a similar mythology, right? Because there's the mythology is different in the Southwest Native Americans versus the Northeast, and the mythology is different in Ireland and it's different in Russia. And so there's this mythology around the owl, but the consistent thread would be that the owl travels through the forest at night, and then that becomes a metaphor for flying to another realm, the land of the ancestors, the land of the gods, the land of the dead, that other realm. And then the owl would come back with a message. So it's very consistent in our lore that the owl is a messenger, less so the deer.
Mm-hmm. The deer to me also represents innocence.
Absolutely.
And the earth. So maybe we have the sky and the earth represented. Maybe terra firma more than the owl. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you had mentioned another animal that I thought was very unusual. What was the animal that you just mentioned? A raccoon.
Raccoons. Oh, there's a lot of raccoon stories. Yeah. Squirrels too, oddly enough. Yeah.
I believe squirrel stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a raccoon?
But a 4-foot tall squirrel. Yeah.
What?
Well, that's what gets reported. I'm not. So a 4-foot tall squirrel is.
Oh, is everything 4 foot tall? Like a 4 foot tall?
Well, that's basically
raccoon?
the height of the gray alien.
Yeah.
So they're
of
mimicking
the little grays. Yeah.
The little grays. That roughly. It's hard to say. Like how do you judge something is it 3.5 or 4 feet tall? And so how do you? But I know one woman who was having contact experiences, and she looked on her back porch, and there were a bunch of raccoons looking in her back window, like the big glass door wall window, like you have behind you right now. And she was paralyzed. She was suddenly paralyzed. She thought she was having a stroke. She didn't make the connection. She just thought there were raccoons in the backyard. And suddenly she's totally paralyzed. She feels like she's having a stroke. And then when she can finally move again, she calls it 911 and said, like, something happened. I was paralyzed. And the paramedics come to her house, and there's nothing wrong with her. And she's panicky. And they're kind of annoyed with her. They kind of chewed her out and said, don't call the ambulance unless you need it. And so she was really like left in a fluster, not knowing what truly happened. And the implication is knowing about the contact experiences that those raccoon were a screen memory of some sort.
I wonder why they pick what they pick, because some people have screen memories like kids do of clowns.
Ew, we all have fears of clowns. I tell you, like, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's just also of angelic beings. We know of some stories of experiencers where they think they see like this woman in a white gown. I talked to an experiencer who also saw the same thing, but this woman in a white gown said to him telepathically, "Is this okay the way I look? Do you like this?" Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, that's fine. That's good. It makes me feel safe." Yeah. So sometimes they ask, but they don't always ask.
Well, Chris Bledsoe has that powerful story of the woman, in white, the Shining Lady. And I've had so that's the Shining Lady is there's a researcher named Timothy Renner. and he's out of Pennsylvania, and he's doing mostly kind of Bigfoot and fairy type research, but he runs into this mythic lady in white story. You know, so it's out there. So it's people seem to be seeing. It seems like they have a limited closet of costumes.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your personal mind. You say that this book is a personal memoir of your spiritual transformation.
Well, my coming to terms with the fact that I'm an experiencer, yeah. That more so, there's a third book called it's called Hidden Experience, and
Yeah, that's right.
and I don't think I sent you. There it is. Yeah. So that's more than my memoir. Yeah. And
this is more your personal story.
so what that one is, and what happened is I wrote a book. I wrote The Messengers, and I had a bunch of stories that I couldn't fit in the book. The book was 400 pages long. Yeah. So I had all these other stories. So I just finished the first book, went right into the second book, and then did the second book, which is Stories from the Messengers. Yeah. So that's like 19 stories that are told in depth in that story. So there's essentially 19 chapters, and those get told, you know, so I had the chance to tell the stories very thoroughly in that book, where in The Messengers, it felt like I would talk to someone on the phone for a week, you know, do like multiple calls a week, talk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And this incredibly complex, multi-layered story emerges. And then in the book, I would just say, you know, and then Sally saw an owl. And it doesn't get much beyond that. And so it just broke my heart that I couldn't tell the stories completely. So I did that second book. And then the third book was my blog. I started my blog in 2009, and the blog was going to be 10 years old in 2019. So when I was like, I started the blog not knowing I had UFO contact experiences. I had some funny stories. I was having a lot of synchronicities. Yeah. So 2009, which is less than 20 years ago.
You didn't know that you were a contactee in 2009, but you saw a UFO when you were a little boy.
Yeah, I saw 5 gray aliens in my yard when I was 30 too. So, you know, I worked hard to like cram that shit down and like not deal with it. Yeah. So, can I swear on the show?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then, so I was totally denying it, and it made my life a mess and stuff. So when it did come time to come to terms with this stuff, it was the owl sightings were actually what was more powerful in a way than the UFO thing. Because I could kind of say like, oh, these UFO things, that's too absurd. I'm just going to dismiss that outright. But the owl stuff was happening to such a degree over and over for about 6 years. I saw so many owls. Oh my dear Lord, it was just outrageous. But so that third book with the Hidden Experience book was, I took my blog posts, because I was blogging in real time. I was having experiences, and I would go right on the blog, and I would say like, this happened last night. This weird thing happened to me last night. Or I woke up this morning and had this powerful dream. Here's my dream. It's interesting. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but between 2009 and probably 2014, I was blogging somewhat compulsively, and people were reading it, and I had a real great crew of people that were reading it and that I was interacting with, and a lot of them became my friends and such. So I was interacting with people in a way that I don't think you can do. I think there's so much stuff online now that I think it's hard to do that in any meaningful way. But it felt very immediate, and so I was processing in real time. So the book is essentially my diary, my public diary of me processing. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, this is real. It's happening to me. I've got no doubts.
It's really admirable how vulnerable you're willing to be. And do you think this whole phenomena includes the desire to be vulnerable.
Well, if you're not willing to be vulnerable in the sense that essentially saying, I don't know, or you're saying if I do know, it's something that the majority of our population would dismiss outright. You know what I mean? Like saying you're being abducted by aliens is synonymous with being insane to most of the population. So you have to be pretty, you know what it was? I was doing cartoon work and stuff like that. Like I wasn't president of the bank. You know, I wasn't a brain surgeon. Like I didn't have any reputation that I needed to worry about. So I was free to talk about whatever I wanted. Because I was doing sort of cartoon work for these books and stuff. A lot of the work that I did was very cartoony over those years. So that I was working as an illustrator. So I was kind of free for that. And then it happened kind of by accident where I really didn't want. I started the blog, and I was only going to talk about my synchronicities on the blog. And those are great blog posts, right? They're short. They got a little punchline. I got a lot of them. And I was just I was going to do a blog of synchronistic experiences. And then very quickly, all of a sudden, this UFO stuff started happening. And I started putting that online, yeah.
Yeah, you can't ignore that aspect of what you do. I guess you try and just kind of separate it, but it always comes back in.
Yeah.
The whole UFO thing. You think this is a push from the ETs to get us to be more aware of what we're conscious of and what we're not conscious of? Do you think that they're choosing owls to kind of help us break out of the mental straitjacket that most of us are in?
Whether they're choosing owls for that, I think the archetype of the owl would imply that. Well, here, let me do one thing here. So there's 5 things. So when I first started doing this research, I just had my blog, and right at the top of my blog, I said, I want to hear your owl stories. And now I have another website, like a homepage and a blog. They're separate, but they all link together. And every page I've got, it says, I want to hear your owl stories. I've got a portfolio of illustration work. And it says there, I want to hear your owl stories, right on that page too. So it's there. And I've been getting them, and they show up. I'm flooded with them. I'm getting multiple owl stories a day, and have been for 15 years, 16 years now.
Still, every day.
Every day. It's increasing. I'm getting more. So,
right.
So what's happened is I'm getting, and this is something I care. I want to tell this part, because initially it was just owls and UFOs. I thought, that's what it is. It's owls and UFOs. But very quickly it was owls and a bunch of other things were showing up too. So I was seeing a pattern. And here's the pattern. It was owls and UFOs, which I could talk your ear off about that. And then the other one is owls and meditation. People seeing owls during meditation or after coming out of meditation, or they have an intention to have they ask a question and then the owl shows up. Owls and psychedelics. People ritually taking psychedelics, most particularly mushrooms, will see owls. Sometimes they're real owls. Like multiple people will see a real owl land on around the campfire. Mm-hmm. Or it'll be a visionary owl. You'll take a huge dose of mushrooms and you'll see a giant trippy owl that's 15 feet tall glowing and will talk to you and give you like a spiritual shamanic message. Those are 3. So the 4th would be owls and shamanic initiation, where people are seeing owls around the time of their initiation into being a shaman. This is well understood in the community of shamans. And I'm not in that community, but wow, they find me and tell me their stories. And then the last one is owls and death. And the stories of owls and death don't match, the stories I'm getting don't match the lore. The folklore of owls and death is the hooting of an owl is a harbinger of doom. Like, a loved one will die. But that's not what I'm finding at all. What I'm finding is after a loved one dies, most often a parent, an owl will come to visit them, make itself very pronounced, very well known, literally flying in the house sometimes. And the interacting with the owl after the parent dies, they'll often talk to the owl as if it is their dead parent, and
Yes.
it will be part of the grieving process will be alleviated in the
Yes.
presence of that owl. That is very common. So these 5 modalities: UFOs, meditation, psychedelics, shamanic initiation, and death. I call these highly charged human experience. So the owl is not necessarily connected to the UFO part. It's connected to this collection of modalities that are all highly charged. And they're all fairly mystical, right? So psychedelics are mystical, meditation is mystical, death has a mystical quality to it. The UFO, you would have to put it into that mystical collection. So that's more interesting to me, that the UFO is just another mystical event in someone's life, the way that death is, or the way that shamanic initiation is.
I wonder if there are other animals that would also come forward, but they're so wild that it's not safe for them to show up. Like, what if you have a UFO encounter and a black panther shows up? Maybe it wants to show up, but maybe these other animals don't show up because they're just too afraid that they would be hurt. I think that we can have that kind of communication with all animals. So that's why I wonder, why is it just the owl, or why is it just the deer, or just the raccoon? And it seems like these are animals that are safe to come out of their hiding, like we're not going to hurt them.
Well, I mean, so deer, and so I've asked UFO researchers, I asked Bud Hopkins, why owls? And he said, they sort of look like the gray alien, right? They got the big eyes, and they kind of look like the gray alien. It's like, though deer don't necessarily look like the gray alien, right? So it's got to be something else. Like, I guess a little bit, but and then they would say, well, if you see an owl at night, it's not that unusual, right? It's striking, and you may take note of it, but it's not that unusual. Same with a deer. And I'm like, yeah, but, so that's when I started looking into these more esoteric thoughts, like the archetype, or the totem of the transformational process, rather than just a like something as simplistic as
just the animal itself.
That the animal kind of looks like a gray alien. Mm-hmm. This is only in the aspect of, this is funny because it kind of blurs where there's a screen memory aspect of it, and then there's real owls. I'm convinced real owls show up. And people send me pictures of owls all the time. Like they'll say, like, I had a powerful experience. I just got one the other day where the owl landed, like someone got up and felt like he was told to go in the backyard with his camera. And he went in his backyard and he took a picture of the owl, and the owl was perched on the head of a statue of the Buddha. So talk about like an archetype on an archetype. Right? I mean, that's loaded with symbology.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mike, I have questions for you.
Great.
And these are from your listeners from Hidden Experience.
How did you get to my listeners?
Because they contacted me after they heard me on your show. Yes, I'm so grateful. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's one. This is for Kari from Reno, Nevada. Hello, Mike. I have wanted to write to you about my initial owl experience since November 8, 2024, but I keep having more weird experiences. High strangeness, as you call it, has permeated my life since that day. I have been documenting it all, and at this point, my experience has become this rich, interwoven, chaotic, magical ball with side quests breaking off that seem to circle back to my past, including one involving you. A lot of relevant connections are coming to light since that owl sighting, and it has all been very positive and exciting. And I do have something to ask you. Is there a link between one's relationship with fear or level of self-awareness and the type of experience one might have with visitors? Thank you very much, Kari.
So some people would say that if you're fearful, you're going to generate fearful experiences. Like, that's like the and if you're not fearful, then you're going to generate sort of benevolent experiences. I'm like not sure of that. So I've heard people say that, and they make a pretty good case of it. So fear, like if we're confronting the unknown, we should expect to be fearful, right? Something mysterious happens. There's an element of fear there. If you're afraid of something, doesn't make it bad, right? So if you're afraid of the dark, there's nothing bad about the dark, but you can be like, it's spooky to go down to the basement when the lights are all off, but that doesn't make the basement bad. So if she said her experiences are magical and such, but it doesn't sound like they're bad. So the fearful thing is, I think that's just human nature. And that's a very common thing I think it was even Whitley Strieber worked to try to lessen his fear. Like he would go out in the woods at night and walk alone to try to confront his fears.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
that's hardcore.
Yeah. So I don't have a good answer to that as far as, but there's certainly people who talk about the fact that like if you're coming from a place of fear and you're fearful in your consciousness, or your like you're a fearful person and you're confronted with this mystery. So she's talking about an experience that happened basically only over the last month. Early November, and now it's early December.
So incredible things are happening to her. And it seems like when you hit that flow, when you're consciously aware, it happens like this. I mean, it does feel like magic. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
The synchronicities are just like off the charts. Okay, here's a question from your listener, Chris Barnes from Redondo Beach, California. And he says that you are one of his favorite podcasters. You just seem like a down-to-earth guy that is extremely passionate about what he does. So here's his question. What has been the single most compelling thing about your research so far, and what keeps you motivated to continue?
Well, the single most compelling thing is that these are very human stories, right? So it's not, I'm not measuring the burn marks in the farmer's field. Right. I'm not looking under an electron microscope at a little fleck of metal that someone found in the sand at Roswell. I am listening and interacting and sharing with people who have had these experiences. And they did exactly, or many of them, like I was in the midst of this where I was struggling and I was, off balance and insecure and fearful, but something real was happening, right? Like I could not deny it any longer. So, it seems like everyone has their own story. What I find the most interesting, and I wrote about this in the Messengers at length, is that the events seem to be orchestrated and tailored to meet the individual, right? One person will have one set of events, and another person will have a different set of events, and each seem to be very much tailored to that person. If that makes sense, where it feels like
the interest. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I do agree. I've witnessed that too. Well, not witnessed it, but I've also, in all the research I've done, talking with experiencers, they're similar, yet there's always something very, very individual about that one person's experience. Okay, here's another question from Monica from Michigan. What are the owls asking of us? Just as we prepare our yards, forests, and homes to welcome new animals and people, how can we make the landing path clear and safe for our star friends? Instead of what they can offer us, what can we offer them? Thank you, Monica.
Wow. So I don't think we need to worry about making a landing pad. Like they're very, very advanced in how they interact with us. They don't really even need to make themselves physically present, right? I mean, you've probably heard plenty of stories where people will, there's nobody in the house, but they get a download, or they hear a voice, or they have a visionary experience, or they have a powerful symbolic dream. There doesn't need to be a landing pad in the backyard for that. So that's like, don't cling to that physicality, because if they want to, there's so many stories of the flying saucer hovers in the yard, and then like this gray being or a Nordic being like rides down on an escalator of glowing light. They don't have to land the craft to get in and out of the craft. They can take you without. So here's a weird bit of data. Then, and I'm not saying anything that other people haven't pointed out before. When you talk to people who have had the UFO contact experience, and it is nearly universal that they'll see a flying saucer, they'll approach the flying saucer, and then they'll be on the flying saucer. There's no memory of going in a door. It's almost zero that people will have a story about walking into the door of a flying saucer or into the door of a craft. There's like a little skip there. People will be taken out of their bed at night, floated up through the ceiling, passed right through the ceiling like it's just nothing. They can see the craft above them. They go up, 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 up. They're floating, and then they're on board. They don't go through any door. Something much more mysterious is going on, right? Because if we went to Yellowstone National Park and wanted to abduct a grizzly bear to do scientific experiment on it, like we would, put the grizzly bear on the helicopter. Like we would physically put it on the helicopter. So there's no memory of that in the contact experience. I've talked to one woman. I'm not going to use her name. I trust her. I believe her that she said she walked up a little staircase and went on. And there was the story of there was a documentary called Witness to Another World. There was a South American boy who had a contact experience, and he climbed up a ladder and entered a flying saucer. Or it was actually like a glowing ball of light.
Did he eat pancakes?
No, that's Joe Simonton, and he never went on board the craft. But he stood at the door and they handed pancakes out to him. So he never went on the craft. Joe Simon, that was in 1958, I think, in Wisconsin. And yeah.
Okay, here's my last question. One of your listeners, Stephen from Woodstock, Georgia. When we pull hard on the thread of the phenomena, how much of our existing way of life, collectively speaking, do you think unravels? Take any time frame you find most interesting.
So if we're pulling on the phenomena, we're engaging the phenomena. We're pulling on that thread, right? What happens and this is that you are confronted with a different form of reality, right? And this is something that I'm not looking at the big totality of the UFO subject. I'm looking at this really narrow sliver of UFOs and owls. So, and that is the most mystical. That little, right? There's government conspiracies and all kinds of issues and that are part of this big continuum of UFO stories. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in the owl stories. And within that thin little sliver is the weird stuff, like really mystical, weird accounts emerge out of the people who have the owl stories. So if you're pulling on that, what I've found from my own direct experience and from talking to many people is they are like, their old definition of reality falls apart. And you must know what I mean as far as like, oh, like whoever these beings are, they can see into the future, they can look into the past, they can communicate with us telepathically, they can seemingly generate synchronistic events that orchestrate a wake-up call, a cosmic wake-up call in the observer. And then and then in confronting that, you are gonna, unless you're already a mystic and you're already at peace in that realm of the netherworld, you're gonna find that your definition of reality will fall apart, and then it needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah. And then when that happens, it's kind of a little bit of a scary place to be, because you don't even know who you are anymore. I call it being in the land of the giant question mark.
Yeah.
You don't identify with your old self. 10 minutes ago, you're different than the person that you were 10 minutes ago. And now you're this different person. You don't even know what that is, and you don't even know what you're going to morph into. It's like that weird stage when a caterpillar is becoming a butterfly. There's that weird stage where it just looks really weird. You don't even recognize it.
Yeah.
And that's how I see the metamorphosis, when there's this alarm clock, as you call it, of an owl getting your attention in such a way that you can't shake it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, it certainly hasn't impacted my life, where my life is just like, this has become the center part of my life for the last 15 years. And I would drop it in a heartbeat if it proved to be uninteresting. It continues to be fascinating.
Do you think your spirit guide animal is an owl?
I would put money on that. It's funny. Like, I feel like it's so, what happens? Oh, this happens so much. I don't need to see owls anymore. I live in a place with a lot of owls. I woke up this morning, the owls were out the window. There were owls hooting. It's just like, but the neighbors are seeing and hearing owls too. So it's not just me. So I'm living in a place with a lot of owls, but it feels like, okay, what was your question? I just got sidetracked there. The land of the giant question mark. We're living in where?
Oh yeah, yes, the alarm clock, when you have this unbelievable experience with an owl that you can't shake for the rest of your life, and that sets the transformation going, and you're like in this strange place that can be really confusing.
You're confronted with a mystery. That's what I sometimes have to say. Like, okay, let's take a deep breath. We're confronted with a genuine mystery, and we're not going to solve. I don't think we're going to solve the mystery, but it's fascinating and important to address it and to confront it and to ask these questions. We may not get the answers, but we have to ask the questions. So yeah.
I also think it's very brave for those of us who decide to do that, who decide to sit, what I call, in that land of the giant question mark, where you don't know who you are anymore, and to start this path of self-introspection. I think it's only for the brave. And I wonder if maybe the owls know who's brave enough to start the transformation. Maybe they get a little message. It's like, oh, that one's ready to understand their quantum abilities. Why don't you go over there and fly right over their head and see what you can do for them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because do you think the owls are coming to people who are not ready?
Sure. Oh yeah. I think a lot of people. I wasn't ready. I was. It was interesting. I was in a place. I saw a bunch of owls with this woman, Kristen, and I'm still friends with Kristen. And this is back in 2006. This is the first bunch of pages in the book, The Messengers, is the account with Kristen and I. But I was at that chapter of my life where I was kind of like, I need to look into this UFO stuff. So I went out camping with this woman, Kristen. We saw a bunch of owls, and I came out of the woods basically, I need to look into this UFO stuff. We didn't see a UFO. We saw owls. But I was, from that point on, I was doing two things. I was looking into my own UFO accounts, trying to make sense of them.
Yeah.
I would say, oh, I'm going to look at them, but then now I'm denying it. Now I'm like, maybe it happened, but now I don't want it to, it's too much, So I was struggling. I was denying, and there was a push and pull. I was fascinated at the same time I was denying it. And then at the same time, because of the owls, I was asking people, like I met with Leo Sprinkle, for instance, and asked him about owls. And I said, oh yeah, of course. The owls are all over this subject. And then he would say, oh, you should call this person. So I'd call someone up who had had the contact experience. So I'd have a kind of Like, what do you call your Alcoholics Anonymous buddy? Is your
Oh, I can't remember.
yeah. So like I
know.
was basically like or you're like
Is it Bob something? I can't.
yeah, the little, or like you have to, like your buddy system when you go on a field trip as a 9-year-old to the art museum or something. So, but I found these helpful characters, these people who were a little further down the path than I was. And that was really important. And I would ask them, hey, have you ever had any odd owl experiences? And it wasn't everyone, but wow, there was a real pattern where they were like, oh, I've got a weird owl story. No one ever asked me that. Here's my story. And that's what I have been, those weird stories have been the golden thread that I'm just content to pull on.
And maybe, you're so patient. Are you the only person on earth doing this owl metaphysical consciousness work? And you're so patient with everyone who sends you their stories.
Well, I got to be careful because I can't get back to everyone who sends me a story. Yeah. I would love to get back to everyone. I can't. I simply can't. It's just too much.
Yeah, I understand.
I can, like it's a full-time job trying to keep up with just the few that I can respond to. Mm-hmm. Your question was
what was, I don't think I had a question. I think I was just making a statement.
I'm patient. You said I was patient where and it's more that I'm the most people, all they really need to hear is that they're not alone.
That's right.
So I'll talk to someone on the phone and they'll say,
and that
I had this weird experience. And they'll say, here's what happens. They'll say, this story is so weird. It's so weird. And I'm like, not to me, it's not. This story, in my files, this story is normal. This is a consistent pattern in my files. Exactly what you've told me. I might not have heard this exactly, but you're not alone.
Right.
And then I can also say that, the other people that I'm talking with, they didn't lose their job. They're still sane. Their family still loves them. There's not like, the world doesn't come crashing down. So, so 90% of what I can do is just tell the people they're not alone.
Yes, that's pretty much what they want to. They just want you to hear too, without judging. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Just tell me your story. I will not judge you. That seems to be once the person gets it out, it's like, oh, okay. Like there's a relief. It's like, I finally got it outside of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you and I provide for experiencers and for people who have high strangeness experiences. You don't deal just with owls. You deal with other animals. And do you deal with any supernatural stories that have nothing to do with animals?
Sure. I mean, yeah. People reach out to me on all kinds of things, and
Okay, tell us how to reach you, where to get your books, what's going on. Are you speaking at any conferences?
I'm speaking in MUFON, Colorado, in early March. So that's the only thing coming up. I've got, and then the easiest way to find me is you could Google UFOs, owls. I'm going to be the first thing that comes up. And then in about the next 25 things below that, I'll be there too. But you can just go to MikeClelland.com. And from there, it's kind of a hub where it's got all the links to my other sites, to the books.
I'm going to show the covers of your books for everybody. Here's The Messenger.
That's the first one. That's the second one.
This is the third one, Hidden Experience.
Yep.
And this is the newest one, which I have to read, The Unseen, which is a paranormal thriller.
It's a fiction book. What happened is I if you stack the 3 books up one on top of each other, boom, 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 all 3 books, it's 1,000 pages.
Wow, Mike.
It's 1,000 pages of UFOs and owls. And people say, hey, Mike, could you write another book? I'm like, well, I could, but it would be the same story over and over and over again. If I can't say it in 1,000 pages, it's not going to do anyone any good to add another book to the list. That's basically saying the same thing.
But aren't you adding another book? Aren't you writing about deer?
So I'm writing the fiction. So fiction is a way for me to sort of play with this story. And I'm working on the first book that the Unseen, with the cowboy on the cover. That book has a lot of owls in it. And then the second book, I did.
This was your illustration.
I drew that. Yep. I did the hand lettering
so
and everything.
everyone
yeah.
knows how good you are. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was, I wanted to do that as a comic book. So I kind of kept the cover in like a comic book kind of style on purpose.
I can see that.
But so there's lots of owls in that book. I had to be careful because I didn't want to put too many in.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a plenty of owls in the first book. And then the second book, I didn't expect to write a sequel, but my readers were like, you can't end the book like that. They were really mad at me. Like,
more.
So I'm working on the sequel, and at first I didn't think I could come up with the story good enough, and then I feel like I've got something here. But it seems like the second book is going to have deer as the sort of totem animal thread that runs through it.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be another bestseller. That's new.
Hasn't been written yet. I'm having it's
That's
only in here.
So cool. That you're introducing a whole new subject matter into this whole ufology, which makes it really cool. Now we're going to start talking about deer.
Well, people are talking about it because it shows up in the reports, but I think the owls show up more than deer.
We'll see what happens. Maybe you're going to start a shift going. Maybe the owls are tired, and they talk to the deer, and they're like, "Can you take over?
Can you just watch me? Give me, let me. I need a timeout." Yeah. But I was but in the interim, like for instance, this summer and last summer, wow, was I having deer experiences. I mean, they were totally normal, real deer, but I mean, there was a mother with 2 fawns that lived in our yard all summer long. It was so adorable. It was so adorable.
It makes you feel so good when you see that. It's like instant stress reliever. There's
baby deer. It's like and I play on that. To believe me, and I've collected a few deer stories that are so powerful.
Well, Mike Clelland, thank you. This was very enjoyable.
Oh my word! This hour just zipped by.
Thank you, everybody who watched and listened, and thank you for everyone who sent questions. Good night, everybody.